Praise be to God, there is no other God except God. In the previous Friday sermon, where we learned about the zakat distribution arrangement, we concluded this graph as the general framework for collecting zakat and distributing it as sadaqah. And the left side in this graph represents the givers of zakat, and the right side represents the receivers of sadaqah, which came from that collected zakat. And if we pay attention to both the collection side and the distribution side, we can see that they both have needs-based categories and merit-based categories. Let us circle with the red circles those categories which are needs-based, and with green circles those which are merit-based. But before we go any further, let me explain that because God is always just, ultimately there is no difference between needs-based and merit-based, because ultimately what we don't deserve is what we don't need, and what we don't need is what we don't deserve. Which is why the Quran does not classify these categories as need-based or merit-based. However, we can think of them superficially like that for the purposes of this video to arrange them easier in our memory. So here we have the needs-based categories circled in red and the merit-based categories circled in green. For example, a submitter who owns extra wealth, he should give a specific portion of it because he doesn't need it. But a submitter who earned a specific wealth through a partially sinful method, he should give a specific portion of it because he doesn't deserve it. Also, on the other hand, when it comes to the receivers of charity in the right side, the poor, the needy, those with inclined hearts, the slaves, those in debt, and the travelers should receive the money because they need it. And the other two categories, the workers and in the cause of God, should receive the money because they deserve it. It's merit-based for those two categories. And by the way, this is why the word sadaqah in Arabic does not exactly mean charity. It more accurately translates as decency. And decency includes both charity towards those who need it and rewards towards those who deserve it. And in this Friday sermon, let's focus only on the merit-based portion, those who deserve to receive the money, and also its natural corresponding category on the giver's side. So we highlighted them in green, and let's hide the other categories so we can focus on this portion of the distribution system for the purposes of this video. So here we have workers in the cause of God, and to simplify the analysis in English, let's merge them together and call them workers in the cause of God. Given that this portion of sadaqah, which means decency in English, this portion of decency is merit-based, it is now actually better to translate it in English as courtesy or rewards, and not charity. We give charities to those who need them, but we give rewards to those who deserve them. And because here we are focusing only on those who deserve them, let's put it here as rewards. And this way of rewarding workers in the cause of God happened in the past also. For example, let's say that someone wanted to go to war with Muhammad, but he did not have a sword. Muhammad, for example, would take some money from the budget and give it to him to go to the swordsmith to order the making of a sword. And that collected money came from those who belonged to the groups of non-submitters. So now the new submitter soldier had a sword to protect the submitters and the non-submitters who paid for their protection within the same camp against the enemy army. So the new soldier with a sword was the worker in the cause of God who did the work of those who did not work enough in the cause of God. This is well known in history, and the Quran mentions a similar example with David. In the Quran, this word worker, which is mentioned in verse 960 to refer to receivers of sadaqah, is also mentioned in verses 34:11 through 34:13, where it is used to refer to work which the people and the jinns did to help David and Solomon in making iron shields in the army and also in building decorations in the temple. And this was designed to grab the attention and frighten the enemy. And the purpose was that once you grab the attention of the enemy, the populations within the enemy camp would be curious about who you are and what you have to say. So in the end, this helped to spread the message. The final result was the spreading of the message. The wars did not spread the message. The wars grabbed the attention of the people, and they would have happened anyway, regardless of spreading the message. But during wars, people's attention is heightened, and then once you have the people's attention, it is a better opportunity to say what you have to say. And this did not happen with followers after Muhammad only, as some Christians and Jews would like you to believe. Once they reached a sufficient number to withstand big armies, even the followers after Jesus and the followers after David, Solomon, the followers after Moses and Noah, they all engaged in physical battles which grabbed the attention of the good souls in the enemy camp, and then this made them pay attention to what the believers had to say. And some of them saw the truth and accepted it. And the battles in the past were physical, but today democracies are essentially peace agreements between believers and disbelievers, which rules out those physical battles, but the spiritual battle still continues. And because the war is spiritual today in democracies, not physical, it does not make sense for us to spend this money for weapons and things like that. But we can use it for things which can create the same effect of ultimately spreading the message. And the way to grab the attention of the people in the modern world are so different from one case to another, from individual to individual. And because it is technically burdensome to evaluate each idea for spending the money in the cause of God, let me present here another method which is flexible enough to include all the other potential methods within it. It's slightly less perfect, but it is flexible enough to potentially reward all the other attention-grabbing methods. I call it a rewards platform because it only has some basic reward policies within which each of you can choose to have their own projects and actions and methods of spreading the message. To simplify it, let's imagine that there are exactly 100 submitters in our congregation. Now, on average, about 50 of them would probably be living with non-submitters. And because of that, they have to pay a penalty zakat of slightly less than 4 grams of gold, which is explained in other Friday sermons. Now, the total collected budget from those 50 submitters would be around $10,000. So now we have about $10,000 per year in that budget line. So let's put $10,000 here. To keep it simple, let's imagine that from our congregation of submitters, only a guy named Jack and a guy named John were active in spreading the message, while the rest of the submitters were busy with their lives. So the workers in the cause of God here would include Jack and John. Let's say that Jack managed to convince 2 of his family members to join us, whose names are Mark and Mia. So Jack convinced Mark and Mia to join the submitters, while let's say that John convinced only one of his friends whose name is Max. So John convinced Max to join the submitters. Now, on the surface, it seems like Jack worked twice as hard as John, but this is not necessarily true, because it is much harder to convince a rich person to become a submitter than to convince a poor person to become a submitter. And an indicator of wealth is how much regular zakat they give. So let's say that after Mark and Mia joined, they together in total declared a regular zakat of $200, while on the other hand, Max alone declared about $300 of regular zakat. So it required more work for John to convince Max than the work required for Jack to convince both Mark and Mia together. And the reward should be measured in proportion to that. So the total declared regular zakat from the new submitters who joined us is now $500. And 60% of it is a consequence of John's work in the cause of God, while 40% of it is a consequence of Jack's work in the cause of God. So we should split this budget line in that proportion. So Jack is rewarded with $4,000, while John is rewarded with $6,000. By the way, there will be safety measures in place against those who might invite their friends to become submitters just so that they can get the money, but that is another issue. And I'm sure from experience that almost all submitters who preach the message would do it for free anyway, without these rewards, because they expect the rewards in heaven and not here on earth, and they have the right to refuse the money, despite doing the work. But please do not refuse it, because this reward is not there only because you deserve it, but also to enable you to do more of whatever you are doing right. So instead of refusing the reward, please just accept it and then use it if you wish to do more of whatever you did. For example, if you convinced your family, then use this money to buy a ticket to go and visit your relatives to convince them also, or things like that. It's up to you. And by the way, as you can see, the money for these rewards comes from submitters who are living together with non-submitters, which I explain in other videos. So you are actually simply compensating for the fact that the submitters who are living together with non-submitters are not working enough, or they are not decisive enough to simply quit living with non-submitters. And it's their choice, but they have to pay for it, and that payment goes towards the active workers who are doing the job on their behalf. So the submitters who live together with non-submitters have no right to complain about this penalty zakat, because they are only paying others to do what they themselves were obliged to do. And in this way, in total, the community does what it is supposed to do, even though some of us do less and pay for it, and some of us do more and get rewarded for it from that payment. And this arrangement is fine. So this platform presents a way to enable the submitters who live together with non-submitters to atone for their sin of being close friends with non-submitters, while at the same time it rewards the good deeds of the submitters who manage to bring new submitters in the camp of submitters. And the reward in heaven is even bigger for both the group who pay for it and the group who works. Now let's take another example. Let's say that the congregation has 1,000 submitters instead of 100. Which means that the collected budget will be now about $100,000 instead of $10,000. So now, let's say that a person with religious influence joins us. Maybe a famous scholar, or maybe a popular religious speaker, or maybe a guy who manages a religious social media group. Any person with lots of influence on others. So let's say that he sees the truth, he joins us the submitters, and out of his thousands of followers or viewers or friends, let's say that 40 of them follow him in the new journey and join the submitters. And they declared a total annual regular zakat of $4,000. Now let's say that the rest of the submitters do not have as much religious influence, and all of them together managed to convince 10 people during that year to join the submitters. And those 10 new submitters all together declared an annual regular zakat of $1,000. So this person with religious influence did 80% of the work in spreading the message, while the rest of the submitters did 20% of the work in spreading the message. In this case, this person gets 80% of the collected money, while the rest of the submitters who did the work share between themselves the other 20%. So he gets $80,000, while the rest of them share the $20,000. And this person with religious influence then can use this money, if he chooses, to re-establish the portion of religious influence which he lost when he joined us. Of course, some of his religious influence will be lost in the beginning due to the fact that the old disbelieving friends will not like him anymore. But that is part of how God designed the system. He made it difficult to switch groups so that only those with enough sincerity and courage can join. So this is the general rewards platform for workers in the cause of God. And this platform allows anyone to spread God's message in the method which they themselves think is the best for their circumstance. Some might focus on talking to their family members. Some might go online and try to convince people. Some might talk to their friends. Some might choose social media. Some might use their old webpage, for example, which they might have already had before they joined submitters. Or whatever method might be available in the future. And all those methods, if they are good enough, they can fit within this rewards platform. And this rewards platform happens every year. And God willing, that one-year cycle will be explained in the next Friday sermon.